I was thinking this evening about a record in Mark. Well, I didn't know where it was. Wasn't thinking about the record. I was thinking about the word that's in here, and I found it in Mark. And the thing that, again, I was concerned about is the way in which Jesus Christ handled his people. It says that, when they were having the Last Supper, which I believe, of course, happened in Bethany, I guess. When they had sung a hymn, they went out in the Mount of Olives. And Jesus saith unto them, All ye shall be offended because of me this night. Is it raining? Well, it's air conditioning. He didn't say that. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. But after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee. But Peter said unto him, Although all shall be offended, yet will not I. Sounds like old Pete, doesn't it? He just comes through all the time, loud and strong. And Jesus saith unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this day, even in this night, before the cock crow, twice thou shalt deny me thrice. Did I read that right? Yeah. Beautiful. Got my commas at the right place. But he spake the more vehemently, If I should die with thee, Peter said, I will not deny thee in any wise. Likewise also said they all. It's real something, isn't it? Did they mean what they said?
Yes.
Sure. They were sincere. But you never know what you're going to do until you're right in the circumstance itself. Really never know. But I'm also confident of this one thing. If you don't prepare yourself on what you think you're going to do in the circumstance, you never will do that thing in the circumstance, that's for sure. But you never know for sure. And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he saith to his disciples, Sit here, while I shall pray. And he taketh with him Peter, James, and John, and began to be sore amazed, and to be very heavy. And he saith unto them, My soul is exceedingly sorrowful unto death. Tarry ye here and watch. And he went forward a little, fell on the ground and prayed, that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And that hour refers to the hour of his death. And he said, Father, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Just imagine this. Which is true, all things are possible unto God. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. Here's a prayer that Jesus Christ spoke to the Father on the night in which he was taken captive. And he spoke this regarding his death. It's sort of beautiful to me that Jesus did this. You see, I see Jesus much more human than most people do, because I see him this way in the Word. The revelation had already been given him that he was going to get into trouble in Jerusalem. A lot of other things. On the Mount of Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah, wasn't it Elijah, appeared in a vision, and they talked to him by revelation about his death. All of that. And yet when he comes right to the door of it, he doesn't like it any more than you would like it. He's so human. Hardly anybody sees the great tenderness. Oh, they see the love of Christ, but it's words to them. They don't really see him as one who became sin so that we might become the righteousness of God. They really don't see him as a man who hurt, whose head hurt when they hit him. They don't see him as a man when they put the crown of thorns and jammed him down on his head and the blood started coming out of those incisions that those thorns had made. And the reason they've never been able to see him, they have a problem with God in it. So their head says, yes, they put the crown of thorn on his head, but they never see it really, because they see him as God, and that makes it so difficult for them. It's really tough. But look at this. All things are possible unto thee, Father. Is that true? Why, sure. Take away this cup, and he's referring to his death. If you go to other Gospels, you'll see it. From me. And yet Moses and Elijah had talked to him about it. There are a number of other references in the Gospel that he knew. And yet, when he came face to face with it, and it's sort of neat, he had taken with him Peter, James, and John of the 11 apostles. Those 3 he took with him. The others, they stayed like on the outskirts of the garden, took Peter, James, and John in with him. And then he left them and he went by himself. And I often think about this, how blessed you can be with people around you. But there comes a time when just you and God have to settle it. You just get alone with the Father. She's yours and Daddy's. And all the best friends you have can't take you through that great moment when that major decision has to be made, whether you're going to follow God and his will or whether you're going to blow it. Whether you're going to sell out to God or whether you're going to fluff out. And that's exactly what Jesus had to do. Left Peter and James and John, went in further, and he said, Father, everything's possible. Why don't you take this cup from me? And then he prayed something that no other man in the world ever has the right to pray. Then or since, he prayed, nevertheless, not what I willed, but what thou wilt. And he didn't pray this regarding anything but basically your salvation and mine. Because what he was saying, Father, is that if there's any other way whereby men can be redeemed, let this cup pass from me. But Lord, if it isn't, not my will, but yours be done. And it's regarding salvation, the cup, the salvation, his shed blood, his life. Any man who prays that prayer today is almost blasphemy. And I hear it prayed in churches for centuries, Lord, not my will, but thine be done. Why, it's a bunch of baloney. He's the only one who had the right to pray it. God's only begotten Son. And after he had gone through that tremendous time, he comes back to the Peter, James, and John, and he findeth them sleeping. Really something. And he saith unto Peter, Simon, you sleeping? Sleepest thou? Couldst thou not watch with me 1 hour? Here was one of the great inner three, and yet on that tremendous night, Jesus was by himself. When he comes back, who was standing with him? Nobody. They were all asleep. And he said, Peter, remember he said, I shall die with thee, I'll deny thee, and I won't deny thee. Yet when he said, brought him in, said, fellas, just pray an hour. I'm going in a little further. When he comes back, Peter's snoring away. Yeah. Listen what he said then. Watch ye and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. The spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak. In his heart, Peter didn't want to cop out. Peter just fought sleep like crazy. But finally he just went to sleep anyways. And Jesus makes that tremendous statement. The spirit is willing, ready, but the flesh is what? Weak. Yeah. And again he went away and prayed, and he spake the same words. Lord, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. Then he comes back, and he finds them sleeping again. Their eyes were sure heavy, it says. And again he said, what you sleeping for? Neither wist they what to answer him. They were embarrassed, they were ashamed. See? Then he goes back and he prays again. 3 times in that Garden of Gethsemane that night, he prayed if there was any other way whereby he could redeem man, God could redeem man without the death of his Son, Jesus Christ. Jesus been in favor. But he said, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And he cometh the 3rd time, and he finds them sound asleep again. And he saith unto them, sleep on now, and take your rest. It is enough. The hour cometh, behold, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. When he came back the 3rd time, it was settled, and he knew. Boy, do you at all get the pathos of this thing, the heart that's here? You're at that great moment in life when you have to make a fantastic decision between life and death, let's say, and you've got one friend, or let's say you had 3, and you were just expecting them to lift you in prayer, but they forgot about it. Sleeping. So you come back and you say, oh boy, did you remember to pray for me? Boy, I forgot. Well, why don't you just pray for me anyways? Go through it 3 times, and the second time you come back, you say, did you pray for me? You say, oh, goodness, I forgot. 3 times over the same thing, and they say to you, well, I forgot. Ordinarily, what would you and I do? We get so disgusted with them, right? We'd say, what? Look, I lift you all the time. I love you all the time. I lift you all the time. Can't you just even lift me once? Jesus could have said that. He'd been praying for his apostles. Comes back and finds them sleeping. Wakes them up and says, okay, fellas, why don't you just hang in here? Going back to pray again. 3 times. Every time he comes back, sound asleep. When he finally comes back, he just says, well, sleep on. For the Son of Man's going to be betrayed. When you think that thing through, it's really got some in-depth heart in it. If there's any person in the world who would have had a right to reprimand Peter and James and John, it would have been Jesus. He didn't. He just loved them. And to me, that's a tremendous thing. Judas comes right after this and betrays him. And yet after the resurrection, Judas was with him for some 38 days. That's love. And you know, I have an awful time standing people for half a minute once in a while. Jesus Christ, he just stood Peter, James, and John, and stood Judas for those extra 38 days. But you know something? He stood us too for a while. But you see the tenderness there and the forgiveness, the love. That's what makes the family. And sometimes we lose sight of those things. I think we as leaders lose sight of it. I think we as limb leaders, branch leaders, twig leaders, somebody said to me that the way ministry was getting so you had to call your twig leader Mr. Before that he was just Johnny Joe. One day before, now he's elevated to twig leader, now you got to call him Mr. What a bunch of crap. See? Sometimes we forget to be tender. We get on ego trips. You know. I think at some place it says a little knowledge puffeth up or something. I think it's in the book someplace. We shouldn't let this happen to us. If any man had a right to be puffed up, it would have been the Lord Jesus Christ, right? But instead of he being puffed up, he was so humble. He had a perfect right to just raise hell with Peter, James, and John. But he didn't. Well, if he doesn't do it, then what right do I have to do it? If I'm really working for him and walking for him. And there's one thing people never get enough of, that's love. Let's turn it around. They never get too much of it anyways. That's right. They never get too much tenderness, too much forgiveness, too much understanding. They can get too much hell in a hurry. See? Every time I read that record, it just, just turns me on inside because of the crucial time, that tremendous hour, taking the three most intimate he had with him. They'd been on the Mount of Transfiguration, they'd been other places with him. And there they are, sound asleep. And yet he doesn't criticize, doesn't find fault, doesn't raise hell with. Isn't that beautiful? Love covers a multitude of sins. Tenderness just blesses people's hearts. And if you love and if you're tender, some people are going to take advantage of you. But suppose they do. They can't take advantage of you too long until that love and tenderness of yours gets into them. The other way has never worked. Everybody tries the other way and it doesn't work. And I think all of us get caught up in that at times, that we're just not forgiving enough. It's easy to talk about forgiveness until you have to get to it and do it. And you find out whether you're just hot air or whether you really got it inside. When you walk in the greatness of this spiritual power and light, you see, I don't see one place in the Word where Jesus Christ ever said, "I'm sorry." I don't see one place in the Word on this. I see a lot of forgiveness, a lot of love. The reason you never have to say to anybody you're sorry, because that doesn't heal a lousy thing. Do you know it? If I pour boiling water over Mark's head right now and I say, "I'm sorry," what would it do? But do you know what would speak to him the loudest? If I hugged him, put a cup of cold water on it, that would say it. That I see in the Word. See? And that he never criticized the apostles, those three, just blesses my heart. Now that doesn't give us an excuse to cop out, but I think it gives us an opportunity to live more dynamically rather than to give us an excuse to cop out. I think it puts us at the place where we can see how we have to continue loving, forgiving, being tender, being understanding, and just be poured out life for the life of others. I think our human tendency is we always want to fight. Stand up, sock them in the jaw. But that doesn't do it. Only the tenderness of the love of Christ manifested makes the difference. And I see it here so beautifully in Mark. The only time I think I see Jesus quite adamant is when he's dealing with people who are born of the wrong seed. then he becomes sort of vicious. The woman at the well, tender. The widow's son of Nain who was dead, tender. The woman taken in adultery, tender. He was more hard on the priest than anybody else. He said, look, who wants to cast the first stone? And I'll bet you when he said it, he didn't say it with a soft voice as I'm speaking. He looked him straight in the eyeball. He said, baby, you want to cast the first one? How about you? He went right down the line. Pretty soon we're going to do a class on the leadership principles of Jesus Christ. Doug Emerson's going to do it. Does a great class. You do a greater one 5 years from now. Because it's just not head knowledge of the word, it's got to be heart knowledge, get into people that teach. And the biggest things that we're doing for our teachers is to get it from their head down in their heart, where they feel it. I think when you feel what you really teach, then you can teach. The only way you get to do that is to teach. What's that, Oberammergau, is that the name of that great passion play they do in Germany every, 5 years, 4 years? That the man who portrays Jesus has to, for 2 years before the play, I think it's every 4 years. Does anybody know for sure? You mean you don't know what I'm talking about? I think that for 2 years he has to isolate himself night after night, and then day after day endeavor to walk like Jesus walked before they get to the play. It's really something. I read the history of that thing once as to how they work and discipline themselves. You see, all great actors and actresses, I suppose, have to feel their part. Well, what about us feeling the part as Christians and as teachers? Now we're going to do, as I said, the leadership principles, great class. It's going to be one of the greatest when we finally get through to it, get it all put together. And one of the great principles of Jesus Christ leadership is set right here. What I read to you from Mark. And I think it's tremendous.